Want to promote your brand? You'll need promotional products, lots of promotional products. Can't decide which giveaway is right for you?
Over the last year, we have travelled to 5 continents in search of modern-day slaves. Men, women and children who are forced to work for no money, held against their will and controlled by violence.
The global economy has created immense wealth in the West, but it's also spawned a sinister new market in slaves. In Africa, Asia and South America, and on our own doorstep in the capitals of Britain and the US.
Especially in this domestic work in England, people are suffering too much. Not only me, there is so many ladies, so many people, others.
A lot of people are deeply shocked that what we're really talking about here is modern-day slavery, right here in the shadow of the Capitol.
We set out to discover where slavery is flourishing, why it's touching all our lives, and how we can challenge it.
People don't realize that even though it's the year 2000, there's slavery all over the world. And in fact, we are benefiting from this slavery.
Because of economic globalization, more and more Western companies are moving their production to places like India, where labor costs next to nothing, and where even young children are put to work. But we'd come to India not to investigate exploitation or child labor, but to find real slaves, people who are paid nothing, locked away and controlled by violence.
We were heading to an area where thousands of young children have been tricked or kidnapped into slavery, making carpets which end up on sale in Britain. Our guide, Gauran Matto, is dedicated to finding and freeing India's child slaves.
We're in northern Bihar, which is the northeast corner of India, Bangladesh to the east, the Himalayas up here, Tibet and Nepal. We're about 300 miles south of Kathmandu. And it's around here that the children are disappearing from. And they're being taken down from Sahasa to Varanasi and the carpet belt around here, where most of the carpets in India are hand-woven. So how many children are actually disappearing from this area?
North Bihar के लगभग 4,000-5,000 बच्चे, लगभग 4,000-5,000 बच्चे गायब हैं जो कालीन उद्योग में काम करते हैं.
And why particularly northern Bihar?
यह गरीब राज्य है, यहाँ स्कूल की अच्छी व्यवस्था नहीं है, इसलिए यहाँ के बच्चे को लालच दे करके ले जाया जा सकता
है. 3 days' drive from Delhi, Gauran was taking us to a remote rural village. Without electricity or clean water, the people here live much as their ancestors did thousands of years ago. It's to villages like these, spread across northern India, that the new slave traders come, either with false promises of well-paid work in the city, or simply to kidnap children.
We were here to meet Chiche, just one of the 5,000 fathers in this area whose children have vanished. Chiche last saw his son Huro 5 years ago.
चलने का बाद में हम तो घर पर नहीं था, हम तो परदेश में था। जब हमको पता वहाँ यहाँ से लेटर भेजा ये बच्चा नहीं है, तब वहाँ से हम चले। वहाँ से जब हम चले तो यहाँ घर पाया तो हमको पता नहीं लगा बच्चा को, तो हम पता लगाने लग गया बच्चा को।
How old was Huro when he was taken from you?
6 साल का उम्र था। महसूस तो ऐसा ही हेर रहा था ये देश में, जो कभी उधर कोई ले गया होगा, कहीं नौकरी होगा, कहीं किसी का पास में होगा, ऐसे ही खोज रहा था। नहीं मिलने पर तो वैसे ही दिल लगता है, जैसे कि पागल रुक नहीं होता है, वैसे ही लग रहा है। अब कैसा वैसे ही नहीं लगता है, जो कि बच्चा मिला नहीं तो उस पर तो वैसे ही लगता है सब। उनको वैसे ही लग रहा है जैसे कि पागल रूप नहीं चलता, नहीं वैसे ही जैसे कि पागल का रूप से गांव घूरता और कभी काम करता, कभी कहीं चले जाते।
Have you had any news at all of your son since the kidnapping?
नहीं, बच्चे का हमारे पास खबर।
Chiche and his family barely survive, scraping together enough food for just one meal a day. There's no way he can afford to leave his family and make the 2-day train journey to the carpet belt where he thinks his son has been taken. The family's only hope of seeing Huro again lies with Goran's organisation, the South Asian Coalition Against Child Servitude, or SACS. Chiche prays that amongst the hundreds of thousands of looms in the carpet belt, the SACS investigators will somehow find news of Huro. Meanwhile, Huro's brothers and sisters are now constantly watched for fear that more children may be stolen into slavery.
दूर नहीं जाने देते, अपना यही घर का नजदीक खेलते हैं, बस अपना उस पर एक आदमी को बैटिंग रखते हैं।
We said farewell to Chiche and promised to return as soon as there was news of Huro.
We tend to think of slavery as one of the low points of colonial history, an offence against humanity that we abolished in the 18th century. Few realise that real slavery is secretly flourishing as never before. Today the slaves are well hidden, but as Professor Kevin Bales, an expert in modern-day slavery, explained, the essential elements are unchanged.
Slavery is what slavery has always been. It's about one person completely controlling another person using violence and then exploiting them economically, paying them nothing. That's what slavery is about.
From British-built castles like this on the coast of West Africa, around 13 million people were shipped across the Atlantic during the 400 years of the slave trade. Professor Bales estimates that the growth of the global economy means that at least twice that number are now enslaved around the world.
In the old days, slaves were expensive. You kept them for their whole life. You took care of them. Today, they're cheap. There's a glut of slaves, and when you've used them, you throw them away if you don't want them anymore. They're disposable. They're working on the lower end of the economic ladder. It tends to be raw materials, agriculture, basic stuff that feeds into the local economy. But all over the world, there are also slaves making things that feed into the world economy. Things like cotton, sugar, clothing, even the kind of bangles and rings and glassware, and even fireworks that you might end up buying could well have been made by slave labor in the developing world.
In the course of the 20th century, many African nations were forced to make money for their European masters by growing cash crops like cotton, coffee and cocoa. Today, the money still flows north as the profits from cash crops are used to pay interest on international debt. Once these commodities enter the global market, it's almost impossible to trace the true origins of the food and clothing in our shops.
One of the difficulties for consumers is the fact that if we're wearing a cotton shirt, there's a good chance that no slavery went into sewing that shirt. But what about when the cloth for the shirt was actually woven? There's a possibility that slave labor might have been used in the mill. There's even a greater chance that slavery might have been used in the fields to grow the cotton before it's made into cloth. And that's also very difficult to monitor. I mean, how can we check every single farm where every single bit of cotton comes from before it reaches a mill, before it reaches a factory, before it reaches a retailer, before it reaches us? That's one of the most difficult things about trying to trace out how slave-made goods reach our lives.
Here in the Ivory Coast, the existence of slavery on cotton plantations has been established by UNICEF. But we were travelling in search of slaves in the country's biggest cash crop, cocoa. The Ivory Coast produces nearly half the world's supply, over 100 million tons of cocoa grown on thousands of small plantations. We'd heard rumours that young men were being trafficked from neighbouring Mali to work on these plantations as slaves. Nobody had documented this before, yet the slaves were disturbingly easy to find.
There's nothing to stop these young men leaving the plantation, except that they've been trafficked 300 miles from home. They're penniless, and they have no idea where they are. Paid nothing, unable to leave, and totally controlled by the farmer, these men are not simply exploited, they are modern-day slaves. They agreed to talk to us while their master was away at market.
How long have you been working on this plantation?
Yeah.
And how much money have you been paid for your work?
What food? Amadi kunti sala amadi ku forse due inti se ka amna laventi woro de ngedo note ale madi woro de la niga afoku akadi ale teso niga baraka woro na teso ka wori di ni du matu ku woro de ko jone inti se ka amna la forse la ale batu ku atadi abem dina tatu la ka gole fo ara abem bonna ala drone bodo note amandini nega baraka mbora sugono ko me wari nega baraka war masoro abana borom na ala durundu baddo.
And do you find the work on the plantation easy or hard?
Akajuku ke mo pese ka fo bara man ka manyu ko akajuku asike ni e mo mi ta kare ite se ka ka manyu ko anu muru mala anu me pese ka ro nga akajuku mo ni ra akajuku
sigiasi mi anga amboya kana war ko ta fa velalo konta un tusia
Coca-Cola. On kera jonge Coca-Cola lute uma ka hui ka on te hui de Coca-Cola jonge.
Once the cocoa pods have been harvested, the beans are scooped out and dried before being packed for sale. Although cocoa is